What's going on to all my Spider-Man fans out there, and welcome back to my channel, Movie Files. Elliot back again with a brand new, huge movie review for the biggest film of the year, maybe the biggest MCU film since Endgame, and yes, easily the biggest Spider-Man film that we've seen on the big screen. We're talking Spider-Man No Way Home. I saw the film last night in IMAX, came home, sat down, wrote down some notes. We're talking pros, we're talking cons. I'm going to rank my MCU Spider-Man at the end of this video, and oh yeah, this is a spoiler-free review. No spoilers whatsoever. I'm so excited to be here with you all. But before we dive into it, quick call to action. Check me out on all my other social media accounts. If you all are new to the channel, consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell. And as you can see on the screen now, if you enjoyed the review, well, make sure to like the video, share the video, but more importantly, go ahead and leave your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk hype level. Let's talk about once you've seen the film, your pros, your cons, your favorite moments, least favorite moments. Go ahead and rank your Spider-Man movies in the comments below. So obviously, like I said, this is the biggest film of the year, the most hype that a film has had besides probably Endgame, which was almost 2 years ago. And this is so much going on with the movie, the leaks, the rumors. Will this crack $1 billion? Let's put that aside for the moment and let's talk about the movie. Starting off with my pros, and I want to start off with the performances, and I want to talk about Tom Holland as Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man. Now, me personally, I am a fan of this interpretation in the MCU, seeing him interact with the Avengers, all the stuff he's went on, the journey of Homecoming, Far From Home, leading him to No Way Home. I enjoy the character. Now, I do understand the criticisms that people have with him, me and particularly him being in the shadow of Iron Man sometimes is very annoying, but the thing that I think a lot of people that we can definitely agree with, he's a boy. He's still maturing as we've seen him in the previous iterations of the character within the context of the MCU. I'm happy to report, for me personally, that boy has become a man in this film. But let's talk about Tom Holland for a little bit. This is, in my opinion, his best performance in the role. He is giving you the charm and the charisma and the kiddie moments that we've come to see. But more importantly, he's becoming an adult. There are decisions that Tom Holland as Peter Parker has to make, some good decisions, some bad decisions that he has to come across. But I think that from an emotional standpoint, Tom Holland brought his A game in this role. And more importantly for me, one of my things with Spider-Man in the MCU, as far as going back to my criticisms, we never see him throwing hands. We see him webbing people up. He's kicking Thanos in his face, but he's never like Tobey Maguire. Go back to him fighting Doc Ock, fighting the Green Goblin. We're seeing punches being thrown, right? But we don't see that with Tom Holland. But I'm happy to say that in this film, my man is throwing some 1-2 combo punches. That made me really excited to see him really kind of become his own man in this film. And like I said, I think that Tom Holland gives his best performance, but more importantly in that conversation, the biggest thing that I think a lot of us was worried about, me being one of them, was, is he going to get lost in the shuffle? We're getting all these villains from previous films, from other films, from different universes. We're getting all the hoolah about who's going to appear, who's going to cameo, but is it going to be a Peter Parker, Tom Holland story? For me, he is at the heart of the story, which I really appreciate that. So again, Tom Holland does a great job. I think it's his best performance as Peter Parker so far in the MCU. A character that I really want to focus on here, and an actress that I'm a fan of, and that is Zendaya as MJ. Now, I have not necessarily been the biggest fan of how Jon Watts and her interpretation is this to be so radically different from the MJ to Gwen Stacy of the world, and her just kind of becoming, having the snarky remarks, and I think they tried to make her so completely different from what we've seen before that it kind of lost her being a character. But in this film, this is her best performance that we've seen in the role, and I'm so happy that Zendaya gets to portray this character, gets to have some more light-hearted moments. She's doing a lot more that we've seen her do in the previous films, and I thought that she really kind of delivered and kind of stepped out of that box of what we've seen in Homecoming and what we got in Far From Home, and she's really kind of opened herself up in this film, and I really was a big fan of Zendaya's portrayal as MJ. And again, her and Ned have a lot more to do in this film, and I really kind of appreciate their growth in the role and getting a lot more to do in the film. Got to talk about my man here. My personal favorite Spider-Man villain of all time is Green Goblin. Willem Dafoe as Green Goblin, without spoiling anything, I think he steals the movie. He is maybe the most menacing that we've ever seen him. I love the journey that character goes on. I love the fact that they stick to the roots of what we saw from him in Sam Raimi's version. And again, without getting into the details, he is completely menacing. He and Tom Holland have some incredible moments in this film, and him and other characters in this film in regards to Willem Dafoe. He's fantastic. If you're a Green Goblin fan, you will be happy with the portrayal of him. Let's transition to another hero here in Doctor Strange, Stephen Strange, who I'll get to him a little bit later in my criticism, but I will say, as far as positively speaking, yes, his magic is cool to see. He's doing some cool visual effects, and there's a lot that, is involved in his character and decisions that he makes that's going to obviously play into future MCU projects, his sequel in particularly. So Doctor Strange, his powers are cool, and we'll talk about him a little bit later. But yeah, let's move on to another character who is a villain, and that is Alfred Molina, who's returning as Doc Ock. Now, for me personally, he gets the opportunity to bring in the Sam Raimi version of his character into the MCU, and it's 50% Sam Raimi and it's 50% MCU, and I'll talk about that MCU, what I'm referring to in regards to changing some of the stuff that we've used to seeing from that character. But I have to say, Alfred Molina brought his A game. Doc Ock, he's not my personal favorite Spider-Man villain, but he definitely has some great moments in this film, and I really enjoyed the portrayal by Alfred Molina. But let's transition over to another character who I did not expect to have as much screen time as he gets in this film without getting into the details. I want to say Jamie Foxx Electro. Some of the stuff didn't work for me, but I want to just stay right now. He might have the funniest line I've heard this far this year in any movie, and probably one of the greatest lines I've ever heard in a comic book movie. I won't say what the line is, but Electro, expect a lot from him, and it is, like I said, a line in this film that had me dying laughing. I'm just going to leave it at that. But let's kind of transition into the tone of the film. Now, the way I'm putting this is, I felt the tone was inconsistently consistent. And now, what I mean by that is, yes, we get the kind of tropes that we've gotten from Homecoming, from Far From Home, with the Jon Watts kind of funny moments, the Breakfast Club type of vibes, but we also get the more serious moments in this film, which is the most serious I've seen in the MCU regarding how Spider-Man has been interpreted in this universe. So I really enjoyed how the tone did have the stuff that we're used to, but they were able to blend in more of the seriousness, add more stakes to the moments, and give us a lot to look forward to in regards to switching up the tone, and again, inconsistently consistent in that tone and in that narrative. So one of the things I also want to kind of touch base on in regards to the structuring of the movie, for me, the first half, I really appreciated the fact that we actually get a continuing storyline from the previous Spider-Man film in Far From Home. And the reason I bring it up is because if you think about from Homecoming to Far From Home, yes, there's characters that obviously go from one film to the next film, and there's some story beats that carry from one film to the next, but we really saw from Far From Home, it was really Peter Parker's story from Endgame and from Infinity War, and not from his own previous movie. So I like the fact that the first half focused on the ramifications and the circumstances from the previous film to get that baton from one movie to the next, which I really appreciated, him going through stereo and all the stuff that we got from the trailers that we know from the film. So I really appreciated that aspect of the first half of the movie. And then without giving too much away from the second half, I felt like a little kid, Saturday morning cartoons watching Spider-Man. It has the nostalgia. It has incredible action. It has incredible stakes. It has incredible emotions. It has the laughs. It has one of the best third acts of any MCU film to date, and maybe one of the best third acts of any comic book movie to date. The third act definitely stuck the landing. So I do like the structuring of how they put the film together. And then lastly, I will touch on the themes in the movie. I think the themes really do shine through because it touches on things like second chances, believing in yourself, making change within yourself, learning from your past mistakes. I really do think that they stuck the landing when it came to the narrative and the themes that the film had to present. And then wrapping up my final pros of the film, there's so many more things I want to talk about, but just kind of narrowing it down. There are some jokes that do stuck the landing. I mentioned Jamie Foxx has a good moment, and I thought that they put the jokes in the hands of the characters that should be telling the jokes, and it fit kind of perfectly within the narrative. And then the last thing I want to touch on, because I'm a big production head, I mentioned the visuals are great, but I want to talk about Michael Giacchino's score. It is absolutely bone-chilling. It is incredible. It just has so much thrills and chills, and it is just almost a perfect score in my opinion. So Michael Giacchino's score is just fire in my opinion. So let's move on to my criticism without getting into the details. I will say, and this isn't really a criticism, I just want to bring this up for all you all out there. This film definitely relies heavily on your knowledge of seeing not just the MCU Spider-Man story, but Sam Raimi and Mark Webb's film. So it will be very interesting. I'm going to be taking my girlfriend to see this film who hasn't really seen the Spider-Man movies like the previous Sam Raimi and the Mark Webb film. So it will be interesting, and let me know in the comments. If you're not too familiar with those films, how did you feel about this movie? I'm just kind of curious because it does rely heavily on you two. I don't think I've ever seen a movie that relies on the audience to know a movie from a different universe that's not even connected to this universe. So I'm really interested in how people take that in. But let's move on to my criticisms. I talked about characters up top, but let's talk more in particular about my criticisms with some of the characters without giving away any spoilers. I do feel like some of the characters, and particularly the villains that come from other universes, were themselves at points, but they also got that MCU treatment. And what I mean by that is the jokes. Now, again, we know that MCU likes to throw in the jokes because they're, family-friendly type of films, but I feel like the MCU treatment was given to so many of the villains, and it kind of changed who they were. Their characteristics were different. The only character I don't think got that treatment was Norman Osborn as Green Goblin, but everyone else to me just was like, it felt forced at times, and it felt like the MCU was trying to make them fit into their narratives versus them being who they were in their previous universe. And I get they have to make that change because they're in a new universe, but it felt like, again, that MCU comedy jokiness was a little bit overshadowing who those characters were, in my personal opinion, without, again, diving into the spoilers. I haven't talked about the director, Jon Watts, who... he had a lot to do. There's so much that this director had on his shoulders. Again, this is almost an Avenger level type of film, and we know the Avengers have been handled for the big ones. Infinity War and Endgame were handled by two guys, the Russo brothers, and he has a lot of weight on the shoulders. And I think Jon Watts did a good job in direction, but my criticism with Jon Watts is I still can't, after seeing 3 Spider-Man films, I saw his independent horror film that came out, his first film, I think it was called Clowns. It's an okay movie, but I still don't know what a Jon Watts film is, right? I don't think he has that flair. He doesn't have that sensibility. He doesn't have the thing that distinctively says that this is a Jon Watts movie. And I feel like if he does have a style, it's like sometimes I feel like Jon Watts, at least in the Spider-Man movies, the 3 movies that he's directed, it's like he sometimes undercuts the seriousness with comedy. And that's an MCU thing in general. But I think that his films really do moments that are supposed to be very serious, very emotional, which there are moments of that in the film, but I feel like sometimes they were undercut by the jokes and the comic relief in the film. And I just have to say, for me personally, I'm very intrigued to see what Jon Watts does with the Fantastic Four, because he has been announced to be the director, but I am even more excited, and this is no knock on Jon Watts, but I'm really excited to see another director with more of a voice direct the next Spider-Man film, because I am assumed that Jon Watts will probably not be directing any more Spider-Man movies because he'll be dealing with the Fantastic Four. So I'm really excited to see who's going to be the next director in Spider-Man, because I don't think Jon Watts has a full voice to kind of really give his distinct style to these Spider-Man movies. So I talked about my man Doctor Strange a little bit earlier, and I have to say, for me personally, I'm getting a little bit annoyed with Doctor Strange. And the reason I say that is because I look at his trajectory as the character. To me, he's almost getting written like the Hulk, because I think the Hulk is just been completely demolished by the MCU in regards to what the version of the Hulk that we have here is. And I compare Doctor Strange to the Hulk because, to me, I wasn't the biggest fan of Doctor Strange's film. I thought that he was the least interesting movie in his own film. Move on to Thor Ragnarok. Whatever, it was a small cameo. Transition to Infinity War, which for me personally, that's the best version of Doctor Strange so far in the MCU. Endgame, I mean, my man was pretty much just dealing with a body of water for the whole film. And then you bring Doctor Strange in this movie. I mentioned that his visual style, his magical powers, they're visually stunning. But man, the power scaling for Doctor Strange in this film was just so frustrating because I thought they were completely sidelined. This is the Sorcerer Supreme, and when you all see the film, you're telling me that the Sorcerer Supreme can't get out of the situation that he's in. I'll just kind of leave it at that. So for my personal taste, Doctor Strange, just visually great, cool character. The characterization and the decisions, I understand from my comic book fans out there, and I read the comics, and I'm not like a super sweaty Spider-Man lore comic book reader. I do know that there is a comic book run that involves a very similar storyline with Peter Parker going to Doctor Strange to help, clear his identity, all that stuff. I understand that that's out there, and that's canon, right? Or I should say that's a foundation of where the story kind of comes from. But for me, in the MCU, I don't think I can forgive the decision that Doctor Strange does decide to help Peter Parker with the spell. It's just so irresponsible to me, and the film does try to attempt to make the spells seem a little harmless, but at the same time they also make it seem like it does have catastrophic events and circumstances. So I was just like, Doctor Strange, I'm still excited for Multiverse of Madness. I'm still excited to see the progression of the character, but right now I'm just not in a good spot with Doctor Strange. I'm just going to kind of leave it at that. But moving on to a little bit more of my frustrations with the film, There's a lot of contradiction in this film without spoiling anything, but I'll just kind of specify it to Peter Parker. We know that Peter Parker in the comics, in the previous movies, and in the MCU, his whole thing is he doesn't want to get his loved ones involved in his messiness. That's why he's one of the few MCU characters that has his identity hidden until obviously what Mysterio did in Far From Home. But in this film, there are so many moments where Peter Parker would say to Ned, to MJ, and to Mary, to his Aunt May, please don't get involved. I want you to be as far away from the situation as possible. I want to fix this because I've made this mistake. He says that, and then fast forward 3-4 scenes later, hey, Aunt May, Ned, MJ, I need your help. Can you help me with these villains and help me fix my mess? It was just so many. It's like, this is so weird to see him kind of contradict himself in regards to, and again, I know the Avengers, you know, we got Captain Marvel somewhere in space, Thor's in space, the Avengers have been dismissed, but I felt like there could have been, I don't know why he just continuously brings his family, his loved ones into these circumstances. Again, I know it creates stakes, but it was just a contradiction for my personal taste. So that was frustrating. But before we wrap this thing up, give you all my overall thoughts, let you know where I'm going to rank this film as far as MCU Spider-Man films. If you haven't already, make sure to like the video, share the video, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Overall, Spider-Man No Way Home was a lot to take in, but I will say it is messy at points, but it is also incredibly entertaining. It's filled to the brim with nostalgia. Tom Holland delivers his best performance in the role so far, and again, like I mentioned, he becomes a Spider-Boy and becomes a Spider-Man. Green Goblin may be the most menacing that we've ever seen him, and I thought that he stole the film. I did feel like some of the villains did get that MCU treatment in regards to being overly jokey, but overall, No Way Home will definitely be the talk of the town, which is deservedly so. It's the biggest film of the year. It definitely lives up to the hype. And I will say for you all out there that haven't seen it, be careful for those spoilers, but at the end of the day, be prepared to feel like a kid again, because this has a lot of heart, a lot of charm, and it is a great Spider-Man film. So with all that being said, I'm going to give Spider-Man No Way Home a 4 out of 5. There's a lot going on. I definitely want to have a more of a deeper discussion with you all, maybe have a live spoiler review discussing all the pros, the cons, what really worked, what didn't work. There's a portion in the film that I did not mention at all in this review because obviously it's going to dive into spoilers, but there's a lot to talk about, a lot to dissect with this film. But overall, like I said, I'm giving it a 4 out of 5, and I don't have to recommend you all to see it because it's, like I said, it's the biggest film of the year, so I expect you all to see it. But I want to know, did it live up to your expectations? And also, like I mentioned, MCU rankings, for my personal sensibilities, is my fandom of Spider-Man, Homecoming, and I'm just referring to the MCU Spider-Man. I'm not ranking all the other Spider-Man films. I'm going to probably do that in a spoiler review. But in the MCU, Homecoming is still my #1 Spider-Man film, followed by No Way Home, and then Far From Home. So that's my rankings. Let me know yours in the comments. Again, share your pros, your cons, and everything in between in the comments below. If you stuck around to this point in the video, I appreciate every single one of you all. Again, before you leave, make sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell. That way you don't miss any of my future reviews. What a crazy 24 hours. Saw this film. I woke up this morning, saw Hawkeye episode 5, which we'll be doing our live stream a little bit later today, or by the time this video out, the video might be available on the channel to watch the live stream now. And then in just less than an hour, I'll be seeing Matrix 4. So what a time to be alive. But again, I appreciate every single one of you all. As you can see on the screen now, subscribe to my channel, check out my other content. We'll catch you in the next video.